This is East Idaho Newsmakers with Nate Eaton.
Thanks for being with us here on East Idaho Newsmakers today. We are talking with AJ Balukoff. He is one of the Democratic gubernatorial candidates running this year, and in a few weeks that will be decided at the primary as far as who the Democratic candidate is.
Yes.
May 15th. There's a lot of people that don't know you, not by your own fault, but generally there's been a lot of focus on the Republican candidates that have been running. So we wanted you to come in here, and first of all, could you just tell us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. My background in business is I was a CPA for about 30 years, built my own CPA firm, and when I sold to my partners, we had about 20 employees. I owned a chain of athletic clubs for about 8 years, and then most recently, 20 years ago, my partners and I built the Grove Hotel in downtown Boise with CenturyLink Arena, and we started the Idaho Steelheads hockey team. I've also been really involved in community service. I found out early on that nonprofits like to have a CPA on the board, so I've served on a lot of arts boards, a mental health facility. I've been on the Boise School Board for 21 years. I've been on the St. Luke's Hospital Board for 13 years, and served on a lot of other community service kind of boards, Boise Public Library for 10 years. I have 8 children and a lot of grandchildren.
That's great. Why did you decide to run for governor?
Well, it's all about education. As having served on the Boise School Board for 21 years, I've had the opportunity to work with our legislators from both parties. And if you look around the state, as I have been traveling the state and talking with schools, it becomes very apparent that in Idaho we are not living up to our constitutional mandate to provide a uniform and thorough system of public schools. We have bright spots around the state, but not everywhere. And when you look at our education performance, we're right at the bottom. We're somewhere in the lower third for student achievement, and we can do better than that. And I've got some ideas that I'd like to put into place and see if we could improve our school system here in the state.
You ran 4 years ago against Governor Otter. You're running again. How often are you asked, a Democrat running for governor in Idaho, do you stand a chance? I mean, do you get a lot of that from the constituents?
Well, I get a lot of that because, we've had a lot of years of one-party domination in the state, and people wonder, what kind of a chance do you have? And I think this year it's a pretty good chance.
Why is that?
Well, just just a lot of things have changed. We've had a one-party domination in the legislature for 57 years, and people look at where that has taken us. I like to call us a scroll-down state. If you want to see where Idaho ranks with the other states in the union, you scroll to the bottom of the list to find us. People are ready to change. We should be moving up on that list. There's no reason we shouldn't have excellent schools and access to health care. So,
what's the main issue facing education in Idaho? Why are we at the bottom of the list? And how would you fix that?
Okay, well, first, it has to do with funding. If you look at the per pupil funding in Idaho, we are very low. We're 49th or 50th in the union on what we spend on education. And that's an average for the whole state. I looked on a website about a week ago called niche.com that ranks school districts around the nation, and they'll rank them by state. So I clicked on Idaho to see how they ranked our school districts. The top 3 districts in order are first Boise, second McCall-Donley, third Blaine County. And if you think of that and think, what do these districts have in common that put them at the top of the list? Those 3 districts have more money than any other district in Idaho. And they're able to hire good teachers. They're able to put in the programs like advanced placement that prepare kids for college, and they take these rigorous courses. Other districts around the state go to school 4 days a week. They've cut out arts and music and PE. They can't offer advanced placement to their kids. So it's not equal, and the funding is important. I think it's also important to create a culture of respect and support for our teachers. There's districts that have a difficult time hiring qualified teachers. I've talked with superintendents that tell me that half of the teachers they have are not certified. They're working towards certification. So basically they're students learning to teach while they're teaching kids.
Do teachers need a raise?
Say that?
Do teachers need a raise? Do they need to be paid more?
Oh, absolutely. When you take a look at teachers and what teachers make compared to other professions that require a similar education and similar responsibilities, teachers are way low. I mean, just compare, for example, a beginning teacher's salary with a beginning nurse salary, for example, and there's a big disparity there.
So
Yes.
you're on the school board in Boise. Did you ever think of maybe running for mayor, or did you think, I'm just going to go for governor, do this?
You know, when I ran for the school board, it was never on my mind to run for a higher office. In fact, somebody asked me after I was elected what my political aspirations were. Are you going to use this as a stepping stone to a higher office? And I said, no, I really haven't thought about it. I'm here to help our schools. I'm committed to education. I have 8 children in the school system, and I feel like I should contribute to it and make sure we have excellent schools. And it wasn't until I decided to run in 2014, having dealt with and seen what they had done in 2006 with the funding shift and not adequately funding our schools, cutting funding during the recession and not restoring it when things started to get better. I decided we need a powerful voice that will be an advocate for education. And that's when I decided to run in 2014. Of course, I wasn't successful against a popular incumbent, but now we have an open seat. And not a lot has changed in education in the 4 years.
So speaking of funding, Idaho has a surplus, a budget surplus, has for a few years. How would you approach the budget if you were elected governor?
Yeah, if I were the governor this year when they had the legislature and we had a surplus, they estimated when we did the conforming to the changes in the federal income tax law, that between those conforming changes and just the improvement in our economy and more jobs, there was about a $200 million surplus. Now, a little over half of that was due to the economy, had nothing to do with changing tax laws. I would have negotiated with the legislature to say, this change in the economy, you guys had made promises that when things got better, we were going to restore funding to education. Here's our opportunity. Let's restore funding to education, and I can understand why we would want to keep the tax law changes revenue neutral. And I would have been just fine with reducing the roughly $100 million that was due to just tax law changes. But what was due to the change in the economy and more jobs, that's our opportunity to improve school funding and other things that have been neglected.
So use that surplus money for education, for the things you're talking about.
Absolutely, and we'll have those opportunities again as our economy continues to grow, as people continue to move into the state and have good jobs. The tax revenues will continue to increase. I believe they're increasing now as we speak. Those are opportunities to improve the funding and help our public schools.
How do you draw more businesses to, let's say, eastern Idaho? Idaho as a whole, but here in eastern Idaho, how do we get more businesses here to increase that tax base?
Well, as I travel the state and I talk to business owners that are trying to bring employees to Idaho or bring businesses to Idaho, I ask them, what are the obstacles for bringing someone to Idaho? The 2 things I hear about are, first, finding a job for the spouse. And they're surprised at the low wages here that they're not used to. And the second thing I hear about is the schools, the reputation of schools. So in my view, the first thing we have to do is build this foundation so that people have confidence that our school system will provide a good education for the families that move here, for those children, and the system will provide people that are ready to go to work, will have job skills for those companies that we hope to attract. That's the first thing we have to do.
Start with the schools.
Start with the schools.
There's a lot of people in eastern Idaho that feel separated from Boise. You know, oh, Boise's over there, that there's this kind of invisible line through the state. How would you as governor help eastern Idahoans feel like, no, we're all one. We're all, one state?
You know, it's not just a divide between eastern Idaho and Boise, but the people up north feel a little about that too. The people kind of tend to talk about Idaho as three different states, and I think that can be overcome by being inclusive, by I think the governor needs to be around in the state and talk to people. And in my campaign, I've been visiting all parts of the state. Yesterday and the day before, I was up in Lewiston, spent time talking with the folks there. I've been up to Coeur d'Alene, to Wallace and Kellogg, and I've been here to eastern Idaho. Later today, we're going to go over to Driggs and talk to the people in Driggs. And I think that's the kind of thing the governor needs to do, is to have a presence in all part of the states and listen to the people, listen to the concerns in each of the regions.
We know that education is a passion of yours, very important. Let's talk about health care.
Okay.
What is your role as the governor? What do you do with the health care mess, the health care situation that's happening in Idaho?
Well, it's really access to health care for all Idahoans, and the first step would be to expand Medicaid so that we have the people that are in the gap have access to health care. They will have a family doctor that they can go to instead of the emergency room. Right now, uninsured people generally do not have a family doctor, so when they get sick, they, for the first part, hope they get better. And when they don't, when it gets bad enough, they go to the emergency room, which by law is required to treat them regardless of insurance status or ability to pay. And when they can't pay and they get forced into bankruptcy, you and I end up paying for that bill through our property tax and income tax. Last year, the state paid $29 million to pay for uninsured care at the emergency rooms. If we would expand Medicaid, the federal government would begin to fund this unfunded mandate and free up that $29 million that we're now spending as out of state funds. The federal government just would return to us the federal income tax that we are already paying. That's the first thing we need to do. The other thing is Idaho is at the bottom in doctors per capita. So we need a plan to get more doctors in the state so that we have better access. When you call up for an appointment, you're not 6 to 8 weeks out before you can get in to see a doctor. We have a new medical school going in. They're going to have 150 students this September. So in 4 years, we're going to have 150 medical students looking for residencies. We don't have enough residencies in the state right now to cover all the seats we have at WAMI and at the University of Utah. So we need to have a plan to increase the number of residencies, because doctors end up, for the most part, practicing medicine within about a 75-mile radius of where they do their medical residency. Dr. Baranaga from the WAMI program, Dr. Ted Epperly from the Family Practice Residency put together a committee that came up with a plan. And I think all we need to do is fund that plan and execute it. It's a 10-year plan that would bring 2,000 new doctors to Idaho through a residency program by expanding medical residencies in the state. It calls for a $15 million investment over 10 years. I think that's very doable, and we just need to make a commitment to do that and increase the doctors so we have better access for people.
Why are you a Democrat?
Why am I a Democrat? Because I think the Democrats have a better platform. The Republican Party, to me, seems to have drifted so far to the extreme, and they get handcuffed by ideology. And I'm very much more pragmatic about recognizing a need, like there's a need to do health insurance better than we're doing it right now. and I'm willing to take a look at what would work, where a lot of people, their ideology prevents them from doing that. Democratic Party values of fairness, of inclusiveness, respect, mirror my personal values.
When you look at the three candidates, the three main candidates, I should say, running on the Republican ticket, where would you say their biggest weakness or their biggest fault is in what they're campaigning? And I know that may be difficult because they all kind of have different platforms, but overall, what's the biggest weakness of the Republican Party here in Idaho?
Well, I think they are not talking about the things that people want to hear about. They're talking about tax cuts, repealing Obamacare, defunding Planned Parenthood. I don't hear any Idahoans talking about that. What I hear when I travel around the state is we want better schools, we want access to health care, we want our public lands protected. I don't hear the Republicans talking about any of that.
We talked about education and healthcare. Let's talk about public lands.
Okay.
How would you everybody? A lot of people in Idaho love to go play outside. They love to go outdoors and camp and fish and hunt. How would you make sure that those public lands do stay protected?
Well, our congressional delegation has done a pretty good job of protecting the lands. When President Trump had Secretary Zinke traveling around evaluating national monuments, they didn't touch any of them in Idaho, and they did in Utah. And the difference was the congressional delegation. Our congressional delegation sent the message to don't touch our national monuments and national parks. That's important to our people. The delegation in Utah didn't give that message. They gave just the opposite message. And I think the governor can be a vocal advocate for protecting our public lands, to make sure we don't transfer them to state ownership, because we don't have the budget to be able to own those public lands. We're much better owning them in partnership with the rest of the United States. And that's how I think we protect those, is keep public lands in public hands so that we all continue to have access to the mountains, the rivers, and all those things that bring us here to Idaho, why we stay and live in Idaho, so that we can backpack and hunt and camp and fish and snowmobile, do all those things in the mountains and in the deserts, and the things that we love to do as Idahoans.
What are your views on gun laws?
On gun laws, that's another Idaho heritage and tradition, is owning guns. I'm a gun owner. I hunt principally waterfowl and upland game. I think it's important to maintain that. I think we can do a better job of doing background checks to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands of convicted felons, domestic abusers, and mentally ill people. Most people are very responsible gun owners, and it's just a very few that fall into those categories that should, because they use guns irresponsibly, shouldn't have access to them. In Idaho, the most common form of gun violence is suicide. So I think it's very important that we identify people who are suffering from different kinds of mental illnesses and get some early intervention and connect them with the right kind of therapist that can help them deal with those issues and make sure that they're not a danger to themselves or others.
You've worked in education for 20 plus years. How do we keep our schools safe? Are armed teachers the answer? Are bats at every desk the answer? I mean, we've seen a variety of rocks. I think one school district has a bucket of rocks, not in Idaho. But what would you say? What would you suggest to school districts across our state?
Well, I am not in favor of arming teachers. I don't think that makes our kids any safer, and very likely makes things more dangerous for the kids. My experience is most teachers do not want to be armed. They want to teach kids in a safe environment. So as school board trustees and as administrators, our responsibility is to make sure we have a safe environment for school. And that is done by, first of all, coordinating, have good communication with local law enforcement and other first responders, And in the Boise School District, for example, we have school resource officers who are members of the Boise Police Department, and there we have one in every junior high and high school in the district. And I think their presence is very helpful. I think it's also important that we make sure we have reasonable physical security. For example, when we build new schools in Boise, and we are in the process of retrofitting existing schools with a buzzer system at the front door, so the doors are locked and someone that wants to come in has to be buzzed in, and to go to the front door, you control access that way. I think it's very important that we promote and foster a culture of respect and support in our schools, that we intervene early when we see bullying or other kinds of inappropriate behavior, but just create that culture of respect for one another, and have open communications in our district. We need to make sure that teachers have the ability, when they identify a child that's having some kind of issues, that we are able to connect them with a social worker, and if needed, connect them with a therapist that can help them deal with mental or emotional issues that they have. I think those are the kinds of steps that will keep our schools much safer than arming teachers.
Why should people vote for you over Paulette Jordan?
Well, when they look at our platforms, they're very similar. You won't find much difference in our platforms. The difference will be in our level of experience. I've been on the Boise School Board for 21 years. It's an elected position. It's non-paid. And in that position, I'm down at the legislature, 21 years, working with members of the legislature of both parties. I've developed relationships. We've been able to bring people together and find common ground to pass education laws that are in the best interest of our students and teachers. I've been on the St. Luke's Hospital Board for 13 years. I currently serve as the chair of the West Region Board. And so I've been very involved in healthcare issues and community needs, and I'm very familiar with the things we need to do in our state with regard to education. I've been a businessman for close to 50 years. I'm very proud of the fact that my hotel and arena and hockey team have created more than 400 jobs just in those three entities, and it's also revitalized downtown Boise. When we built that hotel in the mid-1990s, downtown Boise was languishing. And because we bring 3,000 to 5,000 people down to downtown Boise 3 nights a week during the hockey season, lots of businesses have sprung up, restaurants and so forth, and have created a lot of other jobs. I don't know how many other jobs that has created. So I like Paulette Jordan. She's a nice lady, but she doesn't have the same level of experience and disposition to work with the legislature that I have.
If you're elected, you likely will have a predominantly Republican House and Senate. How do you plan to, as the odd guy out, work with them and effectively make it so that we don't turn into Washington, D.C.?
Yes, I don't feel like I'm an odd guy out. Because I've been working with the legislature, I have relationships with them, and I think they know that I'm the kind of person that looks for common ground and where can we come together and agree and not concentrate on the things that we can't get done, or where we're not going to have disagreement, or we're not going to have agreement, but concentrate on where we can find common ground, where we can find agreement, and let's get done what we can get done. And I think that we'll have a good working relationship regardless of party.
All right. Is there anything else you want voters to know right now as they watch and we begin to wrap up? Well, I would encourage voters to get involved, learn about the candidates, and make a commitment to vote on May 15th. I think it's very important that each party select who they think is the strongest candidate, so that we can have a good, vigorous general election campaign and talk about issues and do what's best for Idaho. I would imagine you have a lot more in-depth answers to issues on your website. Yes. You have a website, Facebook page, if you want to? Yeah, yes, we do. We have website, we have Facebook page, we're on Twitter, on all the social media. I have some good, excellent staff
who are keeping that up to date for me. You can find it for ajforgovernor.com.
AJ Balukoff, thank you for coming in and talking with us. We wish you the best of luck. We have extended an invitation for Paulette Jordan to come on East Idaho Newsmakers. Of course, we will post that if she agrees to come in and talk with us. The primary election is May 15th, and we thank you for watching. Have a good week.